I was adopted. I was adopted when I was 18 months old. I'd been in care for a year. My sort of almost pre-coding was one of loss.
So Sacha's had an amazing career, holding multiple CEO positions, one of which being the CEO of Thornton UK, making her one of the first female CEOs of a large accounting firm within the UK.
I think that probably what I left my teenage years with was that anything was possible for me.
Yeah.
Actually, if business isn't solving problems that matter, what's the point?
I do want to leave the audience, especially in my young female audience, with one piece of advice that you would give if they're really struggling to see themselves in a leadership position because it feels so far away from where they are right now.
I think it's tapping into...
Welcome back to Seat at My Table. Today I have the pleasure of being joined by Sacha Romanovitch on a very hot day, so we might be looking a bit shiny and sweaty if you're watching the video version of this interview. So Sacha's had an amazing career, holding multiple CEO positions, one of which being the CEO of Thornton UK, making her one of the first female CEOs of a large accounting firm within the UK. And now she holds a number of non-executive director positions, portfolio of consultancy, leadership development for both individuals and organizations. So as you can imagine, I'm very excited to bring her to you on the Seat at My Table podcast. And I always love to start off, Sacha, with asking my guests how they would describe themselves in 3 words. I'm putting them under the spot.
How would I describe myself in 3 words? Oh, that's a really mean starter one. Hot. No. Probably curious. Introverted.
Interesting.
Which might be a surprising one.
Yeah.
And third one. I think I'm quite lazy. So yeah, curious, introverted and lazy.
I am shocked to hear the lead. When I think about what you've achieved and what you still continue to achieve, I'm shocked at the word lazy. But I'll be interested to dive more into that. I think what I want to do today is actually go back to a younger version of you and understand who you were as a teenager, as a child, and was it a dream of yours to lead companies and change systems from within? Who were you when you were a child?
Yeah, no, it wasn't a dream to lead companies or change systems at all. I mean, I think as a child, I was a real people pleaser. And it probably goes back to, just in terms of backstory, I was adopted. I was adopted when I was 18 months old. I'd been in care for a year. So I was still very young, but obviously sort of my sort of almost pre-coding was one of loss. And, before you're verbal, that's actually, I've done sort of therapy since to figure this stuff out. But I think it does sort of affect how you're coded, how you respond to things. And I think my mum, my adopted mum, she was a real thinker. And probably deeply frustrated because while she adopted me because she wanted children, she then had 2 birth children, my lovely brother and sister, fairly soon afterwards. So she had 3 under 5s, which I think for her was probably the definition of hell. And she was from a generation of women who left school at 16 and, wasn't able to maybe explore the opportunities she could when she left school. So through my teenage years, she went back to education. And so I had a sort of very strong mother with her thinking, and I had a great aunt who was a real thinker. So I had a lot of strong women around me. I think that probably what I left my teenage years with was that anything was possible for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that. And also I think it shows obviously a lot of awareness, and clearly you've done the work behind it to understand the impact of being adopted from such a young age. I think people underestimate probably the impact that things can have, even if you weren't conscious at the time necessarily, or you can't remember that. Obviously you were conscious, but not on a,
on
adult
a global level.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually think that probably the greatest gift that someone can be given is to believe that anything is possible. I've had a number of obviously people on this podcast, and I was actually listening to and going back to one I had with someone called David Kanotiahulu.
Okay.
And he spoke about how his dad would say this almost affirmation to him every morning, saying, you know, you're special, you can do anything you put your mind to. I was like, against all other evidence, I was a very normal kid, but he instilled this belief in me, and that's always stayed with me. I can imagine it was challenging to be growing up when you were adopted, and then your adopted mother had, you know, siblings that were her birth children, or you had siblings.
Yeah.
And so leaving your teenage years and then going into, I guess, early adulthood, my understanding is that you wanted to go into accountancy because you actually want to set up a fashion company. And so can you take me back to that thinking, and then why you then decided to do accountancy, and kind of the start of your career and what that looked like?
Well, I feel so entitled when I say this, but I was a full grant baby back on when you still actually, you know, got your fees paid and you got a grant, because my dad worked for the local council. My mum, you know, did various things to try and bring in money. So we didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up. And so I ended up doing, I'd always made my own clothes because that was a cheap way. And I must have looked a shocker when I was a teenager, because I used to make clothes out of old sheets, because, you know, old sheet, dye it, you could do all sorts with it. Yeah. So I'd always made stuff because that was a good way to do things. And so when I was at uni, my final year, I bought a sewing machine and I was making and selling ball dresses in Oxford to supplement my income. Yeah. And I really enjoyed it. And I thought, I'm going to be a fashion designer. Yeah. Set up my business. But at that time, 1990, there was a big recession and a lot of fashion designers were going bust. And I thought, I probably ought to be sensible about this. I'm going to go and learn how to run a business. And then I got into, and I deliberately went to a small firm. So I had offers from, you know, the big firms at the time. And then I'd also applied to some smaller firms. And I remember Keith Auckland, and I'll mention his name because he's passed now, but his partner may get to hear this, I don't know. But I remember going into his office for the interview and him being so excited about the businesses he was working with. He was pulling off his shelf like files and plans. Yeah. And I thought, this is where I want to be, because I'll actually get to work with people who want to do some interesting stuff and maybe help them do it. Yeah.
It's really interesting that you were already thinking in such a responsible and thoughtful way, because I think especially when you're that age, you think, you know, other things aren't going so well in the economy, but I can do it and I'll just do it anyway. And the way that you were thinking about it, it's testament to how you're already thinking, okay, this is actually one way I can get the experience and the knowledge to still get to an end goal. Yeah. When you did go into that and you started working your way through your career, at what point did you start to think, okay, maybe I'm not going to start this fashion company and I'm actually really happy doing what I'm doing? And
it took a while, actually, because I think that, again, it's probably this people pleaser thing. It's like, once I get into doing something, I'm going to do it to the best I possibly can. You ask me to photocopy something, it will be perfectly straight. It will be, you know, I'm a bit of an annoying perfectionist. I'm sure some of my team would say about that. So going through accountancy, you know, there's a lot of study with it, so it's quite all consuming, working with clients and everything. And it was only probably I married far too young after university. I divorced when I was it was 1995, so I was 23, 24, something like that. And it was only at that point that I was like, I've been going on a bit of a conveyor belt. I wonder what I should be doing. And with my now husband, we went traveling for a year. And even during that year, I wasn't sure that I would come back to accountancy. I was actually looking at whether I enrolled in the Delhi School of Fashion to pick up fashion again. And I drove him nuts by going to different silk factories and bead factories and buying loads of stuff, which I still have. Yeah. And I think the thing that sort of shifted it was we split up for a bit and I did a meditation course in Thailand. I went and was silent for 10 days, which no one ever believes, but I was. And it was during that whole sort of immersion into, I suppose, a really, you know, a philosophy of life that makes you sort of really be curious about, well, why are we here and how should we live our lives? And, you know, it probably sounds a bit eat, pray and love and ridiculous. But bizarrely from that, I sort of thought, well, I'm going to go back into accountancy and see what I can do that. And it wasn't fully formed at that point, but it was certainly like I came back in with seeds planted around, I want to make a difference. and I want to be able to make a difference that's more than just a one-on-one.
Yeah.
And to something meaningful, but I didn't know what at that point. So don't think the 30-year-old me was like fully formed. Oh yes, I'm gonna. Not at all. But certainly, I think that was quite a formative thing for me. Was just taking some time out and not just carrying on this conveyor belt of I've done my accounting exams and now I'm going to come through and be a partner, which was where I was when I took the career break.
Yeah, there's actually so much I want to hone in on there. I feel like you're speaking directly to me when you talk about being a people pleaser and almost this perfectionist in having to do everything to your top ability.
Yeah.
I think if you know you can do it, it's almost me, and I'm sure it's the same with you. It's like, if I know I can do it to this standard, I have to.
Yes.
Even if it doesn't make that much difference to someone else. If I'm looking at something and it could be a PowerPoint presentation I'm making for a pitch.
Yeah.
And all the page numbers have to be perfect. The fonts have to match. And no one would even care, but I care. So I'm really intrigued to understand, have you overcome that level of people pleasing, or have you just found a way to use it to your ability? Sometimes it can be quite draining or time consuming, energy consuming. It's hard to know when to take a step back and you know, not be working till 12 a.m. on a pitch deck.
I'm sort of like my successor at Fair for All Finance. I used to drive her nuts with the that shade is not the exact shade of our brand palette. And she messaged me the other day, goes, I was doing a PowerPoint presentation. She goes, you would have been horrified by it. And I was almost like, send it to me. So I think there is, and it's interesting actually, because I think that actually some of it, I think now is merged into, there are some things that I care about that I can control. And sometimes just actually having that degree of, you know, visual, how things look and stuff, it matters to me and I can control that. And that's a little bit of this Celtic world that I can control. And as long as that's not too horrid for everyone else working around me, and they do give me feedback, I can manage that. But I think the broader people pleasing, I think I've got much, much better at actually, and I think this was the journey in terms of standing up for your values and really discovering about what do I care about in the legacy I leave for this world? What do I think are the standards I hold myself to? Who will I choose to work with and who do I choose not to work with? And so I think I'm just much, much stronger about that now, and probably also sort of very happily embodying middle-aged woman energy, whereas like, pick up that piece of rubbish, what are you doing?
I think that's a really important way to look at it, because there does have to be a point where you have to decide where you spend your energy.
Yes. Yeah.
As you mentioned, you came back not wanting to make impact to one person, but almost systemic impact.
Yeah.
Which is a very big goal to have, and you're going to have to spend your energy in the right way. And so going back to what you mentioned, where you were obviously working your way through your career, I understand that you got to a point where you questioned, is this actually what I want to do?
Yeah.
Before that, you were clearly being successful because you were working your way up the ladder.
Yeah.
And obviously not everyone does get to partner level at these types of firms. Can we understand a bit about what you think made you successful in the corporate setting for people who are looking to climb the ladder and want that level of...
I think for me personally, it was really interesting because, you know, some people, you know, who are my peers were wanting to get to partner because they wanted to be a partner.
Yeah.
Whereas I was probably one of those annoying people that there were things that I wanted to solve, things I wanted to get involved in, and to solve them, to get involved in them, then I needed to be at the next level. You know, when I came back from traveling into the London business, you know, I came back in with this whole, you know, we need to do business differently. We need to think differently about how we do things. Looking back, it was on a really micro scale that I was looking at it. But, you know, I came in probably with, I look back now and I think, you know, was I arrogant or was I naive? But, you know, I come back in thinking, well, I could do that better. Yeah. And, you know, and I remember one sort of thing where I'd gone to Malcolm Ward, who was an incredible, leader I worked with in London. And I was frustrated with the strategy with the firm at the time, and I'd had an idea, and he was like, "Oh, this is a good idea. Why didn't you come in and present it to?" Got me the opportunity to present to the leadership team, and I had felt tip slides that I had drawn up, and I cheerfully stood in front of this leadership team, going, "And I think we should do this and that and the other," and then. From that, they gave me the opportunity to get involved in doing some stuff. And I suppose I learned from that is that, they could have just laughed at me and ignored me and thought, for God's sake, she's unprofessional and all of this sort of stuff. But instead, they gave me the chance and the opportunity to get involved. So I suppose there is and this is the confidence definitely my great aunt gave me, because she gave me unconditional love. Like, my mum and dad were very critical in their own different ways, which was their way of pushing and challenging. But my great aunt gave me unconditional love. And I think this is important actually for women in particular. I went to an all-girls school, and then by serendipity, I ended up at an all-girls college at university. What all of those things gave me was that there was no reason as a woman why I couldn't do stuff. Yeah. And that's quite important.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that, because I have a friend who works in an all-girls school in London. And she didn't go to she went to a mixed sixth form. And obviously as young women, we are quite aware of certain challenges and barriers that we face. And have faced in our experience. And I remember she said to me, "I'm a bit worried about these girls. In some ways it's amazing because they are almost blissfully unaware of what the real world can be like when men are in the mix." Yeah. But in some ways it's amazing because, it's difficult because I'm worried about them in the real world and how they're going to feel when they actually do come across. Because it's going to be confusing. All of a sudden, there's people who underestimate me because I'm a woman. Yeah. Rather than I'm growing up amongst all these intelligent women and our teachers believe in us and we're just on a path to greatness.
But it's funny because you see, I don't think I ever, when I came into the workplace, I can look back now at things, think, oh, that was all good. But at the time, I think almost because I wasn't attuned to notice, because that hadn't been part of my world and I wasn't attuned to notice it. And there was also, I look back now and, I know that there were lads in the audit department who'd rate every girl that came in. But at the time it was just like, oh, silly boys. Yeah. It's just like, it was sort of almost like my son has this sort of it's not that deep. Yeah. It was just like, if they want to waste their time on stupid stuff, fine, I'm going to get on and do what I care about. So I think there is something in terms of that inner confidence of, do you know what? I'm going to do what I think is worth it. And if they don't like it, I'll find somewhere. Yeah.
And I think what strikes me about your story is even when you're talking about, standing in front of that leadership team and pitching your ideas and strategy, I think so many people wouldn't have even suggested an idea that they have because they think, what's the point? No one's going to listen. Or they don't actually allow themselves time to think about more strategic things and that's not my position. I'm junior. Yeah. What do I know? But I think the amazing thing is, and what I'm discovering throughout my career is how much people are receptive to those who actually just have ideas and think differently and who pitch things. Yeah. And if they don't agree with you, they think, oh, but this person's actually caring about this business enough to pitch an idea. Yeah. And so I think sometimes it's just, why not just give it a go? And
and sometimes I'm a real fan of this thing called perceptual positions, of putting yourself into the place of different people in a situation. And I mean, you must be managing people now, if I'm presuming.
No.
Not yet, you will be. But if you put yourself into that position that you're managing someone, and if someone sits and just expects you to do all the thinking versus someone saying, hey, I've got this idea, what do you think? You're like, oh, thank goodness, someone else is doing some of the thinking, and I think there is also something, and this is maybe useful for anyone who is now managing people, is I got a brilliant thing from a woman called Susan Bright, who was managing partner at Hogan Lovells. and we were talking about people bringing forward ideas, and I was doing this big thing at Grant Thornton around shared enterprise and sharing ideas and stuff like that. And I was saying, you know, sometimes the ideas people are bringing forward are sort of things like, you know, can we have more Granny Smiths in the fruit bowl? And it was sort of like, oh gosh, you know, if that's all we get, you're going to look like a right idiot. And she was like, well, sometimes people will trust you with their little idea to see how you treat it.
Interesting.
And if you trash that, they're never going to trust you with their big idea.
Yeah.
And I really love that idea of like, there's a green shoot. And so someone is just tentatively sort of seeing, is it safe here? And then if you're like, okay, and, you know, take them through a bit of a why, how, then you're nurturing their confidence in stepping forwards. And I really like that.
That's really interesting, because I guess there has to be, like you said, a safe space and a culture created that doesn't happen overnight. And so you have to reassure people that they'll be safe to raise their hand, because also in some industries, that's not the case. Yeah. And actually the conversation we were having on the way to the studio, this opportunity that has come up, obviously, I'm not managing people yet, but I was having a conversation with someone saying that I would love to manage people. And this really amazing female leader I was having this conversation with, she was saying actually that she wants me to come over to her team. Yeah. And she said, the reason that I want you to come over to my team is because I'm just watching your proactivity, and I want people on my team that I can trust, take things off my plate. Yeah. And I'm not telling them what to do. They come to me and think for me, because I'm busy and I'm stressed and I have other things to manage. Take something out of my mind. It's not going to be punished. It's going to be celebrated, because now it's one less thing that I have to worry about. Yeah. And I'm trusting there's many leaders around me that are going to be thinking about the business. And I think that, again, is testament to actually just being passionate and curious and having ideas and taking it forward, and the power that has. So obviously you got to a point where you were reaching success in your career that loads of people would love to experience. I do always think there's a danger in this, where people get to that level and you do realize, oh, I'm here and it's not what I want. And I've reached this goal, but there's still something missing. And obviously you reached that when you got to that stage and thought, is this actually me making these decisions to get here, or am I on this conveyor belt? Yeah. How did you feel when you did get the opportunity to take the year out, and what did that actually look like to you? Obviously you mentioned that you did meditation and you traveled around. Tell me a bit about what happened to you personally and the transformation throughout that period.
It was oh, do you know, it's such a privilege. I look back now, and I was quite old on the backpacker trail, because I was coming up to 30, and I sold my flat, which had been on 100% mortgage. So back in the day, just to put some context on it. So I sold my flat, got rid of all my stuff, my material possessions, and me and my partner, we'd booked a sort of a one-way ticket to India. And I think the luxury of, particularly if you've always been a people pleaser and you've been sort of doing what's expected of you, you know, you do well in your exams at school, you do your O levels, you do your A levels, you go to a good university, you know, you go into profession, you you're on, to put myself into a position where every day was, well, if I can do anything today, what will I do? Yeah. And gradually feel your way into that, and being able to sort of see, what do you think about? What do you read? How do you approach it? And I remember reading a lot on that. And, you know, sometimes when you read books, you'll read the sort of the notes sort of saying what inspired the book. Yeah. I had the luxury of being able to say, oh, that book inspired this book, so I'll find that book and read it, and following those threads. And so that reading, stepping into other worlds, stepping into how people think, you know, it's probably my mum's legacy, really, is that, because that was what she always did. Looking back now, I think that's where it planted all the seeds of thinking much more systemically about the world that we're in, and my part in it. And it did take time to evolve, but it was definitely, and I qualified as yoga teacher while I was away. I did all of this different stuff, which was learning to be comfortable with myself, comfortable with my own company. And also probably a really big one, I think, for lots of us, is the meditation. So if anyone, I would recommend a 10-day silent meditation, because what you learn is that your thoughts follow patterns, and we tend to ruminate on stuff, and, you know, a different thought comes in, and then you're down that sort of same old spiral. 6 days into a meditation course, I was bored with myself. And, you know, a story would start in my head and I'd think, oh, if I press that button, I know where it's going. And I'm so over that.
Yeah.
And so I've learned, not, you know, there are times when I still ruminate, but I now know that actually I can choose what I think about.
Yeah.
And that autonomy is just like, whoa.
Yeah. I just love everything you're saying, because it is so rooted in also what I believe, but even if you believe it, it's really hard to then action that. Yeah. So obviously you can be aware that you tell yourself certain stories. Then I've never heard someone word it before, where you almost get bored of those stories. So you think, here we go again. I know exactly where this is going to go. Let's just stop it. Let's just not listen to it. Choose a different story that's actually going to be a bit more exciting.
Yeah.
And I think that meditation is a really powerful thing. And I actually was talking to my twin this morning. I have a twin, and she had a friend there, and it was funny because I probably looked a bit like a crazy person, because I was lying in our garden this morning doing a guardian meditation. And she thought I was nappy, so she brought her friend out to introduce us. I'd never met her before, and I was just and they were like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Sorry, I'm just doing guided meditation. Don't mind me." But I used to do it very often, and then life gets in the way. We were talking about how I've been traveling a lot, and I've noticed such a difference in levels of stress and anxiety, how much control I feel over the thoughts coming in and out of my mind, and the lack of ease I have in trusting my own voice. Yeah. And so I've started to try to get back to that, and instantly there's this peace that you find, even if you spend 10 minutes a day. After this period of your life, when you did 10 days silent meditation, I actually would love to do that. I can't imagine what would come up.
It's so good.
How did you then carry on that practice? Because something that I really want to talk to you about is the level of intentionality that you've brought into being a leader. And it's all well and good using meditation and doing that when you have this time out of life and it's not kind of in the rhythm of the day to day. And the hardest part is then when you go back into previous patterns, not falling back into old habits.
Yeah, and I completely did fall back into old habits, and I think that there is always a bit of that yo-yo where you know, you sort of go through and then you're like, oh God, remember, and actually just being okay with that a bit, I think is quite important. I'm just sort of thinking in terms of myself, you know, like I've always worked hard and been quite driven and stuff, but I think the difference that comes with that meditative practice is that your mind will pay attention to what you direct its attention to. And so that sort of emerging idea of sort of purpose and why am I here, that actually even in how you work, that direction of your mind to, well, what do I care about? What are the problems that I want to solve? Over time, that surfaces and becomes more and more important. And I've been through real ups and downs and distractions. And maybe I'll pause because I can talk too much on this bit. We'll maybe come back to this bit. But I think it is hard. I think finding different ways to create that pause, that stillness in your life, and your ways for almost your manual of me. To have your way to notice what are the patterns and traps I might fall into, and knowing for yourself what are the things that are right now I need to pause, step back.
Yeah, I guess it's that level of awareness in yourself and knowing yourself well enough.
That's that awareness. That's a really good word for it.
So I think I've been having this conversation with some people around me, and it's this conversation that you have to have with yourself one day and kind of take responsibility for the fact that all the thoughts going in your head aren't necessarily your own thoughts, and you have to be proactive and intentional about deciding which ones to listen to and which ones not to listen to, and understanding you know, who, like you said something so amazing earlier, and it's, you know, you are like kind of your thoughts and where you put your energy in. And I think that understanding is so powerful, because it's like I can actually create who I am.
Yeah, absolutely. That I just so believe that, and that thing around, you know, whatever, that thing around sort of choice and agency, that whatever situation we're in, however hideous, there are choices that we can make. That I don't know if you've read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. I'm probably going to get that wrong. I'm menopausal, so to the rest of the group, like, you know, words and things, they muddle up, but you'll get it.
I'll find the book, I'll put it in there.
He was a psychologist who was in one of the concentration camps, and the book is really sort of talking about, you know, how in the worst of times do you actually find to sustain your humanity. And it's a very, very powerful book, and it really speaks to that, you know, even in the, you know, you find who you are in the very worst of times.
It's really powerful.
Yeah.
I think also because some people who are going through the worst of times, that's almost like a light at the end of the tunnel, in the sense of, no matter how bad this gets, at least I can learn something about myself. And that's something that you can find deep within, that sometimes doesn't come out if you're just happy and going through life, because you don't need to dig deep.
Yeah.
And so there's so many routes I can take this down. I do want to go back to the point where you came back from this time out, and then you did eventually become CEO.
Yeah.
And I want to understand, how did you actually develop the skills to do that? Because I think the role of a CEO is one that actually you can shape, because you're leading a company, and you have to choose where you put your energy, because otherwise you can't do everything.
Absolutely.
So what did that actually look like day to day for you? How did you get there? And then we'll go into actually the type of CEO you were, and how you tried to kind of completely redefine what that looks like.
So when I came back into the business, and I've mentioned Malcolm before, I came to see him because I was like, look, you know, I want to come back into the business, but I want to be able to support managing the London business as it was, London audit and tax business as it was then, as well as doing client work. And so I was really lucky that I was you know, he gave me a role, which meant I was supporting him in managing the practice, as well as, you know, doing client portfolio work. And, you know, I think from that, you sort of, you know, I started with sort of, you know, really basic things of, you know, we haven't got a complete, because we'd been through a merger and stuff like that. It's like our client list. We don't even know who all of our clients are properly because the system's rubbish, and, you know, quite micro stuff, I suppose, sorting through. And then, you know, starting to form views in terms of people and management. So there was a lot of stuff that was the real nuts and bolts of just like what has to happen operationally for a business to tick. And I was probably quite annoying at that phase because, you know, I'd be like worrying about what were actually quite small things, but they're kind of, you have to have the discipline to get all of those foundations right. And so you know, I see some people that I sort of speak to, you know, it's at earlier stage in the career, who get frustrated with having to do all of that stuff. But that's almost like your craft of understanding the nuts and bolts and what it takes. And then when I was coming up to partner, I remember Malcolm saying, why do you want to be a partner? Why do you want to be a partner? I was like, just tell me what I need to say to be a partner. And it was a really painful period because I was having to go like, why do I want to be a partner? And I don't know that I ever fully formed it, but obviously formed it enough, in terms of, you know, businesses I wanted to work with and things I wanted to do. But then when I came through as partner, I think for me, I was very, very lucky in that Malcolm got promoted. And as a really quite new partner, I was, you know, given responsibility to lead the practice, but I fell into immediately. Sometimes there is like the stuff that's got you to a place of being able to be all over everything and all over the detail is then what got you here won't get you there. So I fell into that. I've got to do everything and be in charge of everything. I remember my first 360 feedback and I'd been like working my socks off and it was awful. And it was all like, you know, she's controlling everything. She's a really bad role model. She's working all the hours that God sends. And it was just like, but I'm trying to do that. No one's appreciating me. What's wrong with them? But it was a really good awakener around, okay, I need to shift how I'm doing things, because this is, you know, it's wearing me out and it's wearing everyone else out, pissing them off in the process.
That's really challenging. 'Cause I bet that was also heartbreaking and such a hit to the ego as well. It's really tough to hear that. Yeah. So I think it's really hard to understand something that I think to myself. So I'd love to get to a position like that one day. How do you know what strategy is needed and even forming that? Because I think, like you said, it's so different in the day-to-day and, you know, succeeding in the operational things and kind of bringing the business. That you might have an amazing salesperson in my like finance world job, but could they lead a team? No. Could they actually build a strategy of growth for the business? No. So how did you learn that, or did that come naturally because of the space you were taking to pause and think?
A bit because of the space that I was taking, and I think also the people that I was getting to work with. I mean, I got to work with some amazing partners who I just learned so much from, and you know, I look back now and they were incredible, really, because you know when I was given the sort of the managing partner of that London unit. I think one of my oldest partners, Michael Rogerson, he must have been approaching 60. And I remember him coming up to me going, I can either be a real pain in the arse for you, wanting to stick my nose into things that are going to drive you crazy, or you can keep me busy with the stuff you want me to do.
Interesting.
And that was, I mean, it's such self-awareness from him. And he was brilliant out in the market in terms of, so, you know, I think sometimes some of those different things around, right, where as a business do we want to be? You know, there are, you know, how do we, you know, grow as an accounting firm? And well, actually, you know, there are different parts of the market where we think we can be really good at in terms of, you know, we were in professional services, we're in media, looking at, right, where is the, you know, the market need? How can, you know, so starting to shape out, right, we want to grow as a business. Here are the areas of the market where we think we can grow. To grow, who do we need to do that? What do we need to offer? And so, but you kind of got to start with that sort of end purpose and then almost work back from that with well, how would we do that? How would we do that? And, you know, there was a guy called Hamish Scott who gave me this very simple sort of how, why, in terms of strategy, that if you sort of say, right, well, this is where we want to play, this is the difference we want to make, that you just go how. And then also if people come up to you with ideas of like, we should have more Granny Smiths, why? Show me how this is going to actually help us take this strategy forward. And that very simple discipline is a really great way to build that strategic muscle, I think.
Yeah. And so if you're talking to someone who, you might have actually done this before, but, you know, succession planning. Yeah. If you had someone who was still a few years away, but you thought, okay, they've got that potential. Yeah. What would you tell them to do in order to prepare themselves for kind of a leadership role? I think
it all starts with people. That was probably where I got to with leading the London business was, it's the people, stupid. If I get brilliant people and they're free to be thinking, then they'll all do amazing stuff that you hadn't even thought of yourself. Yeah. And that is what will actually sort of motor the business forwards. So I think learning the really, I'm a real fan of a coaching leadership style, but this idea that as a leader, that it's not your job to do all the thinking, that so there is something around, you need mastery and command of your areas of expertise. So put in the hard yards so that you actually really have got that nailed. Yeah. But then it's sort of like stepping out of that into, right, now if I'm leading a team of people with that expertise, my job isn't to do the thinking and answer all the questions. My job is, am I asking the questions to help them to think? Yeah. And, you know, and help them to grow, and also providing space for them to try and learn. I don't like the language in business. People often talk about try and fail. I did chemistry at uni and it was experiment and learn. So, you know, as a leader, being able to create that space where people can experiment and sometimes it not work out. And for you to know, when do you need to provide a safety net? Because actually getting it wrong isn't an option?
Yeah.
And where is it okay that they try something out and actually it hasn't worked, and what have we learned from it? So I think that leadership skill around, and also I was talking to someone about this yesterday, that if you're really sort of starting to think business wise, I really like this. I don't know if you've come across the Japanese ikigai. Yeah. So I quite like applying that at a company level as well as at an individual level. But this idea of what does the world need? What are we great at? What do we love doing? And what do we need to earn? That sort of looking at those aspects and starting to think about that on a company level, and start to form your views, read around, look at what's happening, so that you can actually start to form your view of, right, where is this business going? Is it solving stuff that matters? Is this the place I want to be in?
Yeah.
And then to start to develop your skills in, identifying, right, if this is where we're going, what do we need here to be brilliantly successful at this? And to then nurture and bring that on in terms of team, in terms of systems, in terms of structures. God, sorry, that was me going off on one of my... No, there's just so much.
Yeah. It's really helpful, because I think it's just changing the way in which, like, some people are thinking, like, some people never get to a stage where they're thinking that way, and they're kind of zooming out and actually taking a pause and thinking, what do we care about, what we're good at, and where's the sweet spot? And reminding ourselves that can be on an individual level, on a community level, and bigger and bigger on a company level. And I think my favorite part of the story is the fact that you started with your first 360 with kind of difficult feedback. And then I read that in your last year as CEO, you were listed on the Glassdoor CEO's list, and you had about 94% satisfaction from your employees. So that's quite a journey that you went on. And I would love to talk about your belief that kind of the business model's rather outdated, where historically it's been all about profit, competition, and really success should be judged by the impact you make.
Yeah.
Because I'm a big believer in that, and the individual responsibility to show up in this world in certain ways.
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk to you about how you developed that, and also how you grew the conviction and inner confidence to enact that in a world where that isn't the case, and there are shareholders and people around you saying, well, actually, no, we want profit.
Yeah, I sort of look back on it, and I think actually one of the sort of things that, I'd had these seeds, I suppose, planted doing that in my year off. I'd had seeds planted that I hadn't really done a lot with over the years. I had children, so I was 36 and 40 when I had my children. And I think that starting to look at the world in the context of what is the world that I'm passing on to them, it does bring that to the fore. But then probably the one of the things that really started to shift it was when I was so having banged on about the people stuff for quite a long time. I think you probably know the story. I was on maternity leave with my second, and the CEO at the time, Michael Cleary, phoned me up and said, "You've been banging on about this people stuff. I'm creating a people and culture leader role on the board. Do you want it?" And I was like, yeah. So 9 weeks later, I was in Paris presenting on stage while my husband was looking after the 9-week-old baby. It was just like, it was mad. But in that role, I was asked to take on responsibility for the sustainability brief alongside the people role. And there was a really seminal paper that I read, which was Michael Porter's Creating Shared Value. It's a Harvard Business Review paper. And that was really sort of laying the seeds of like it helped crystallize this idea of what is the role of business in society. And actually, if business isn't solving problems that matter, what's the point?
Yeah.
And that led me into this sort of following sort of threads and discussions and meeting people that really started to be very formative in what did I think Grant Thornton was doing. And And that really got me into this whole, actually, I think business has a really important role to play in solving stuff that matters. This business has an important role to, and actually, if I ran this business, maybe I could do something to make that happen.
Yeah.
But I can really date it back to that being almost the sort of the space which let me draw together stuff that was all a little bit fluid and emergent into, this is why we're here. This is what we can do.
Yeah. And what do you think, what's the reception you've had to that? Because as you have spoken about this idea that if a business isn't here to do something good, what's the point?
Yeah.
Obviously, that's going to ruffle a lot of feathers because that's so against, the messaging globally where you've got companies just chasing profit and people pushing for that. And has it given you hope because of the reception that you've had and people who are doing amazing things, or was it actually a bit concerning when people weren't?
I think it's a mix. And I think it's one of the things that I trace back, and I love reading and referencing stuff, so I'm sharing all stuff. One of the essays that really influenced me is one called 3 Guineas by Virginia Woolf. And she's actually talking about system change. The premise of the essay is that someone's asked her for a guinea to stop war. And then she starts analysing around, well, to stop war, what does it really take? And really it's an essay about women's empowerment and enfranchisement. But what she draws out in that essay is effectively that the systems, and they're still the systems that, our legal systems, our commercial systems, our political systems are still built on, was that they were also really codified around sort of like, 1840s, 1860s. That's when all the professions emerged. Yeah. But they were there to actually protect the interests of the public, who at that time were rich, het-presenting, white, property-owning men. And so everything that we've got then is codified to, around profit, around competition, the rugby fields of public schools, around hierarchy, the people at the top will do all the thinking. And so, when you start to look at it like that in terms of what is the operating system we're built on, and saying, well, that served a particular group at a point in time, we are now in a very different world and we need a new operating system. That shift from the two is incredibly difficult, and it takes, it's a decade, centuries work. If you look at, if you look at scientific revolutions, the change from Newtonian to that wasn't right, we now got a new theory.
Oh, that makes sense.
Let's all it just doesn't happen like that. And there are a lot of people who are benefiting considerably from the system as it operates now. And, in many ways, I think a lot of what we're seeing on a geopolitical level is people just grasping on to, I benefit a lot from this and I really don't want it to change. Yeah. But ultimately, I saw a brilliant LinkedIn post the other day, and I can't remember who it was to attribute it, but this post, it's like, look, the planet doesn't care what you think. The planet just is. And if you've got business models that aren't based on the planetary reality we're in, you're just a bit daft. And so I do think that some of these, I'm hopeful, because I do think a lot of these things, whether people like it or not, change is going to be necessary. And I think a lot of the groundwork done by people in the B Corp movement and all these different movements it's the groundwork that shows a pathway that actually, if business is working in service of people and planet, then we've got it the right way round. This whole, everything's in service of the economy, bonkers. I do think we will get there, but it's, I think we're going to go through a rough ride over the next few years to get there. And
I think it's a really interesting time that we're in, because I think there was a big push in that direction. And then obviously now there's this massive backlash because of fear. So you're looking at this group of people that you mentioned are benefiting from it. So mainly white, wealthy men.
Yeah.
And it's funny because they're almost trying to assert their dominance and push in the other direction. Yeah. But if you actually look underneath that, that's based on fear and insecurity.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to lose this power. And I think one of the reasons why I was so excited to talk to you is because you are someone who looks at something that's not working and isn't afraid to say, this isn't working, let's change it. And I think the reason why I started this podcast is because I can get so consumed by like anger and frustration at the state of the world. Actually, the way to ease this anger and stress and anxiety is to take action. And I think the more people that felt as though they do have the power to change systems, the better this world would be, because there's so many people who are kind and loving and powerful and have amazing ideas but don't do anything because they don't believe it's possible. If we actually showed maybe there is a route to make change and you can do it, change would happen quicker.
And also I think that there is sometimes that, you know, because stuff going on in the world, sometimes it just feels so overwhelming that you can get into the, well, there's nothing I can do. And yet actually, you know, there was a brilliant example I use quite a bit in terms of, you know, individuals can actually change so much. And one of the examples I had was this guy, Brian, who was the receptionist in our office when we had an office in Euston. It was an 8-story building. And when he started working, he was a security guard, sorry. When he started working there, you noticed everyone came in, heads down, no one talked. And it was just a bit like, God, this is a miserable lot. And he just started saying, good morning to people as they came in. I kid you not, within about a week, everybody was coming in going, good morning, Brian. It was just like, and so I think that, you know, that thing around, I mean, it sounds naive and naff, but being the change you want to see, you know, if you want people to be kind and nice to each other, you know, say good morning to people. You know, do low risk stuff, you know, pick up that piece of litter. It's boring stuff, but it's all stuff that says, I'm choosing the world I want to live in and I'm taking responsibility for that. And I might be giving up, you know, not looking stupid or, you know, whatever it is. But because I think there is also recognition that actually, you know, in some ways, all of us are benefiting from the system as it is. Right. You know, I did one of these podcasts and it was brilliant. A guy wrote to me and said, you made me really angry because you've so benefited from this system and you're sitting here talking about this stuff, but you've made money from it and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, absolutely. And, you know, and so, you know, that sort of challenge of we're all existing in the world as it is, whilst trying to bridge and create the world as we want it. And that tension, that paradox is there for all of us, but at least sort of name it, be aware of it. And, you know, I have to keep challenging myself on it because it's easy to be distracted and dragged into, I mean, one of my real bugbears, and I think this is something in terms of particularly for women, is through history, there have been mechanisms that distract women from accessing their power and using it to change the world. And, while it's sort of some of it has been debunked, Naomi Wolf's The Beauty Myth really sort of drew a lot of that out, you know, that every time that women's, you know, there's been a resurgence of women's power, then, you know, of course it's come in and we can't breathe or, you know, just different things that come in. And you look at, like, I read that the treatment industry in the UK is like 22 billion. I haven't fact checked this number, so I'm sure someone will fact check it. But I was like, God, what a massive distraction of all that beautiful energy and power from creating the world we want. You know?
I feel so strong about this because I get so angry that my boyfriend gets to sleep in longer because he doesn't have to do his hair, do his makeup, choose an outfit. And, you know, a male colleague said to me at work about, I can't remember how the conversation started, but I mentioned that women have to take a lot of time and energy into how they look in the office. Like, no, you don't. People wouldn't care if you showed up and like you hadn't done your makeup hair. I was like, I have done that before and people have commented and people respond differently to women depending on how they look. And so it might be invisible to you, but it's a very real distraction. I can't believe the time we've literally, I could talk genuinely, and I say this often because I can just ramble on, but I could talk to you all day. I do want to leave the audience, especially in my young female audience, with one piece of advice that you would give if they're really struggling to see themselves in a leadership position because it feels so far away from where they are right now. What would you say to them from your own experience to kind of shake them out of that and give them that hope that they could be a leader of a country or company? Or
I think it's tapping into that energy of what you really care about. Oftentimes people who, think they can't be leaders, but can be, will be showing in some part of their life all of the qualities that would take them to be a leader. They're just scared to take them into this other place. And so there is something in terms of that awareness and noticing. If you feel that you're leaving some of yourself at the door when you go into your workplace, then either find a way to connect. There is something about caring about something more than yourself, caring about a purpose that is more than yourself, and believing in that in the place of your work that allows you to overcome that fear and bring all of that. When people talk about bringing your whole self to work, that's not bringing, I'm having a row with my boyfriend, blah, blah, blah. That's all of your energy and passion and potential to make a difference to the world, being able to really bring that to life, bring that to, reign in what you do. And if that energy is being left at the door, find a way to connect it to what you're doing or find something different to do.
Yeah, that's really powerful thing to say. And I think, it's the power of caring about something is unbelievably strong. Yeah. So if, like you said, if you're not somewhere where you can find the energy to care, please get yourself to somewhere where you do care, because then energy is endless.
Yeah. And also I think the other thing is like that mastery of, the groundwork. Sometimes you want to race, but, I spent, probably all of my 20s and quite a lot of my 30s just being able to learn my trade to give me the foundations to be able to build other stuff on top of it. And so, be okay with that. But again, be in a place where you're bringing your energy to it so that you're really giving and learning your best.
Yeah. I think that's really amazing advice. And I'm someone who's extremely impatient. But Sacha, thank you so much for this conversation, but also just being a phenomenal role model and someone who is trying to make changes in the world, and that will make a lot of people uncomfortable, but also benefit the world as a whole once people get used to it. So thank you. And I just really appreciate your thought leadership and how you have decided to be a leader, because I think you don't always see that in the world, and it's really kind of a hopeful thing to see.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to thank you, because I mean, like for those, I expect you guys all know Tallulah, but I mean, like, this is a woman who is like traveling for business. She's half in Switzerland, she's half in the UK. We're recording here on a very hot Saturday where she could be choose to do anything else in the world, and you're actually choosing to use your energy to do something that hopefully is making a difference to people. So
Thanks so much.
What's so cool is like I'm now at the stage of life where I see amazing people who I've had the privilege to have conversations with doing fantastic things, and I think, I had a conversation with them back. So I'm looking forward to my sort of like in 10 years time being able to see what you're up to, because I'm sure it's going to be something amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thanks so much.